Okay, it should now be recording, I think. Okay, good. Okay, all right. So, okay, so all of that, I think we got all the preliminary stuff out of the way. And okay, so now I will hand it over to Matt, if Matt, you want to do the introductions. And
yes, okay, thank you. So quickly, I'm going to go through our panelists and just like introduce them, and then I'm going to turn it over to them a little bit to let them, have a minute or two, and then we'll come back and like we can have a Q&A. There's not too many people here right now, and so I guess it can probably be a little bit more like focused, where you'll have a little bit more time to maybe ask the questions you really like want answered. If in the rare event that 15 people join in the next 2 or 3 minutes, that might have to be a little bit more flexible, but for now that's the idea. So first I'm going to start with Grace and just introduce her and say, okay, Grace graduated in 2022. She worked in high energy experimental physics and now is a postdoc at Fermilab. Next is John. John graduated in 2021. He worked on nuclear physics, I think, experimental nuclear physics. And medical physics, I see, and now works at Meta. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yep, cool. How do I pronounce your name? Is it Sina?
Bingo.
Yep, got it. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I don't want to butcher anyone's name. I see that you graduated in 2020, and now you work at, is it Siemens?
Siemens.
Siemens, sorry. There we go.
Or as Germans would call it, Siemens.
Siemens, okay. The Siemens effect, I love it. And then last is Meng. Meng is still at UVA, I think, finishing up, and then now works in like autonomous driving in the Bay Area. Did I hear that right? Nice, okay.
And started her own company.
Oh, okay, yes. Yeah. Well, I can't leave that out. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is like I'm gonna go back to the beginning, go back to Grace, and I'm gonna ask you just like, can you comment a little bit about your grad school experience, and then talk about how you ended up where you are now. And then if there's anything else that you would like to say to yourself like 2-3 years ago as like a kind of a higher up in graduate student, what would you tell them? And then I'll just go through each of the panelists and like ask them the same series of questions. Then we'll turn it over to the Q&A and we'll ask what we want to know. Cool.
Okay, yeah, so as Matt just said, my name is Grace Cummings. I'm a pretty new graduate. I actually defended in October. So I'm pretty new, but I am the only, I think, academic track person here. So if people have questions about that, feel free to ask. So yeah, I'm still a postdoc. I am a postdoc at Fermi National Accelerator Laboratory on the CMS experiment. So that's the same experiment that I did my graduate work on. But I spent most of my time not at UVA. So I lived for the last 4 years at CERN. And before that, I was at Fermilab for several months. And then I just did my 2 years of courses at UVA. And that was really what high energy physics is different from a lot of fields, but that was exactly what I needed to do in order to be in the position I am. And then I guess 3 years ago, Grace, that would have been what? Beginning of 2020, I probably would have told her to get a better desk chair and move. So you're not in your bedroom, so you actually do your physics analysis and you're not still doing it as a postdoc.
Okay, all right. So John, let me ask you the same series of questions, talk a little bit about your graduate work, like what did you do? How did you end up now at Meta? And then if you could tell yourself as something as a fourth or like maybe a fifth year like PhD student, what did you wish you like knew?
Sure. So I kind of bopped around in research a bit, mostly working with Nalanga in nuclear physics, and then his wife Krishni, who was a medical physicist at the UVA Medical Center. So I did worked on some experiments at Jefferson Lab. In particular, my thesis was on a phenomenon called color transparency, where basically if you kick a proton hard enough, it gets tiny and then doesn't interact with the rest of the nucleus. And then with Krishni, I was doing a lot of stuff on medical imaging, in radiomics in particular, which is using image processing techniques and machine learning to try to get some kind of useful clinical predictions that you might escape the eye of a human. So I got some experience with machine learning doing those projects and started applying for jobs doing machine learning stuff. And I ended up getting an interview at Meta. And now I'm working on a team that does machine learning explainability. So machine learning models are famously very opaque. They're kind of black boxes. It's not really clear why they're making what decisions they do. So we are messing around with algorithms to kind of poke them and shed some light on why those decisions are made. In particular, we launched a product in February that shows you what activity users have on and off Meta platforms that have influenced the ads ranking models to choose a particular ad to show to you. So if you are on Facebook, you can click, why am I seeing this ad? And it will give you some information about why that choice was made. And as far as advice, if you think you're gonna end up going into tech, it's probably wiser to start getting your resume together sooner rather than later. Start looking at job postings to see what the requirements are. Learn SQL. That's a good language that I didn't really come into contact with much in grad school, but I use almost every day now. So learn SQL.
Is SQL SQL?
So, yes, SQL.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, great. Thank you. I see that everywhere. I was like, I wonder what that is. And then
People pronounce it both ways. It's fine.
yeah, so now I know to like actually like bother to like look into that. Great. Thank you. All right, Sina, I'm gonna ask you the same questions. So if you want to talk a little bit about like what you worked on in graduate school, and then maybe how you found your way into Siemens, and then anything you would like to tell past self as a graduate student.
Sure, yeah. I joined UVA as a grad student, perhaps maybe for a reason that can resonate with some people at least, which was essentially I didn't have a plan that was not grad school, and so I tried it out. And at UVA, I kind of bounced around a little bit and ended up in atomic molecular optical physics field. And kind of quickly realized that that's not my cup of coffee after, I don't know, a few months spending there, which was kind of combined with failing the qualifier exam. So it was kind of it was not a great period of time. But then, I went to, and I was almost about to quit actually. Then I went to a seminar that we're all required to go for the first couple of years, and then it's encouraged to go. And it was a talk by Gordon Cates, and it was about hyperpolarized gas imaging, which is essentially you have this magnetized gas or polarized gas, and you inhale that. It's an inert gas, helium-3 or xenon-129, and then you image the gas inside the body instead of imaging the body itself, using MRI, like a clinical MRI machine. And I seem to remember that I was kind of blown away, but Gordon didn't have funding. He had this former student of his that is currently in the radiology department and Department of Medical Imaging and Radiology department, Wilson Miller. I reached out, had to go through some hurdles because at the time he wasn't a physics, he didn't have a physics appointment. So I kind of had to make a case to get my physics PhD, not in physics exactly.
Yeah.
Which was kind of fun, but also a bit of a stressful situation. But anyway, he ended up getting his appointment after a few years. I joined his lab and kind of did my PhD in MR physics. Yeah, that's how I ended up kind of where I am. And the role that I applied to at Siemens, kind of close to graduation, was a very natural step for me because we use their MRI scanners for all of our experiments, and we kind of knew their systems in and out. So it was kind of a natural step for me to move through. However, we didn't really have the proper connections to them. Like Wilson specifically didn't know anyone there. So I funny enough, I kind of applied and got an interview, and I guess went in, but it is helpful to have connections to the places that you apply. Getting internal referrals is a big plus, definitely. So yeah, and advice. What advice would I give? I would say just kind of be open to all opportunities. You know, you came to grad school and you learned something pretty new that you didn't necessarily have expertise on at all. Maybe some of you did kind of coming in, but if you're kind of open to opportunities, it's interesting how you end up in places that you didn't necessarily think that would fit your bill, but you might kind of like it.
Okay, very good answer, actually. Thank you. Okay, last, can I ask a question, Meng? Are you the only theorist here? Did everyone else do like experimental physics? Okay, so we have our token theorist. That's good. So Meng, if you want to tell us a little bit about like what you're still working on and maybe wrapping up, and then if you want to tell us about your startup and then how you found your way to the Bay Area, and then again like anything you would like to tell your past self, or anything you think that a like more senior graduate student. I mean, it doesn't have to be senior graduate student. You can tell like any graduate student, but like I think most people here are more senior. Anything you
Sure.
wish you would know.
Sure. So, I'm working with Jeffry Teo. So my research is mainly focused on the theoretical condensed matter physics. So we worked a lot on how to understand those condensed matter system through topology. So which means every day we play a lot about like algebra topology and algebraic topology. So theory is hard. It's really hard, especially when you are trying to use some fancy math to understand it. But yeah, I would say I spend like extremely happy like 6 years with Jeffrey, like working on the theory. So he basically showed me how beautiful it is, and also like let me realize I probably won't make my living like through theory. It's going to be really hard. But I really enjoy it. And Jeffrey is not very pushed. So I would just like have enough time to explore what I love. So during my PhD, every year I would just took one class from another department. So I took class from computer science department. I took algorithm, and I took machine learning, and some other like fancy algorithm class. And also I took class like financial engineering in the engineering department, in the system engineering department, and also reinforcement learning from system engineering department. Yeah, at that time, Google released the AlphaGo, so where it beats the human player. So I was curious about the algorithm behind it. So I like took the reinforcement learning class, and I also took some class like from math department. But eventually, it went too hard for me in the end, and I dropped it all. I dropped all the math department class. It's too hard.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, and so for research side, yeah, I kind of like Jeffrey gave a lot of freedom to us, so I can like try to study and do research about what I like. So we make theoretical models for a lot of fundamental theories in condensed matter physics to understand how universe emerged from the condensed matter view of point. And also we make theoretical model to materials that can realize some of the topological behaviors of phenomena that we can predict. And yeah, that's basically my research and the study. And after that, like I think in my fifth year, So I started to apply for looking for opportunities in quantum computing. Hey, CU is here. Come say hi.
I see
John.
you.
Hello.
John is here.
Johnny, John,
That's John.
are you serious?
People don't recognize you. Great. Yeah, so I started to explore some opportunities in quantum computing, and I did some internship. So I did some like unpaid kind of research assistant with the professors in University of Toronto. And then I found a job like in a quantum startup located in Singapore. And I spent like 6 months there building quantum compiler for quantum computers. So it's really fancy. It's a really fancy experience. And also during that time, I started to have my own like business ideas about the quantum computing. So at that time, I wanted to build the community and build the tools for community to communicate quantum computing, like quantum circuits. So at that time, I decided to not continue with the job in quantum computing, but rather like I would just like start to build my own startup. And I also build it with CU.
Oh.
So it's very interesting experience. So we formed the idea, and then I would reach out to all those higher leadership of quantum computing companies. So I would talk with them, connect with them, and trying to gain support from them. And I also joined the startup bootcamp in Darden Business School, and in there I also receive a lot of help and support from those faculties and the investors. So, and also in quantum industry, so last year I was invited to the Quantum to Business conference, and I was there to pitch our idea. So I also talked with a lot of investors. So it's really like a great opportunity, like to understand the entire industry. So if later like if you are curious about quantum computing industry, I'm sure like a lot of physics students are very interested in quantum computing industry. So I can share more. But yes, that's the quantum part. And then like I was approaching to graduate. So basically my visa has to be renewed. So I have to find a job. Otherwise I need a company to sponsor my visa. So I chose to be a software engineer in self-driving company. I basically applied like 200 jobs online and then got this opportunity in self-driving. And that's the kind of the summary of my journey.
Okay, very cool. All right, I myself, I'm gonna have questions to ask the panelists, but at this point, I think we're gonna transition to kind of the Q&A and like open it up to the other students. I would say like kind of try to keep your questions as broad so that like you're asking it to the whole panel rather than to like any specific person. But if you feel like you need to ask like kind of a specific person, that's fine too. But ideally, like all the panelists, hopefully can chime in and like and give their like 2 cents.
Yes, and I will say, so the mechanism that we'll kind of try to use is, I'm sure you guys have been through countless Zoom meetings, so you're probably familiar with this, but in reactions, you can raise your hand. So if you have a question, you can just raise your hand and we'll recognize you and you can feel free to ask a question. We please encourage you to ask questions if you have any, because you're doing a service not just to yourself, but to others as well, who will doubtless likely have similar questions that they want to ask. So highly encourage you to do that. But actually, I will take the right of being a moderator to ask the very first question to Ming, because I've actually talked to a few people, and international students, I think, are in a particularly complicated and difficult situation. So any advice that you'd have for international students about how to navigate the issues with the visa and such?
The most important advice is prepare early. Otherwise, you will be on fire at the end of visa expires.
Yes.
And I would also encourage everyone, not only international students, to to do some internship during PhD. So like with the internship experience, you will be more likely to get interviews from the company. And also it helps you to build your resume and understand how this society works.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. And I'm sure if there are any person who would want to continue that thread of, because I know this is a live topic for a lot of people. So yeah, but okay, we'll open up now to questions. So anyone, if you have a question, just please raise your hand and we'll recognize you and you can ask the panelists any question you might have. And also I think Matt and we have some paired questions as well, if there are.
I've got plenty of questions, so like,
oh yeah.
I can do all the talking, like if we absolutely need to, but I'll try to give other people a chance.
Yes, I think.
So yeah, so I got to ask a question. I think it's for Meng and John. So you are working in machine learning. So now we have this ChatGPT is being quite successful and is able to understand the human language, and that's amazing, right? So I think that's a breakthrough of this artificial intelligence. How far are we from the self-driving, into real practice? And also, I want to ask, the success of this ChatGPT, do you think that's gonna bring more job opportunities in the high-tech companies? Okay, thank you.
Well, I can take on the self-driving part. Actually, I'm using ChatGPT every day, like during my work. It's really helpful. And I think like for self-driving, for this industry, I think it is good for physics students because they really love physics students. So because I know a lot of physics PhD, they got interview and offer from the self-driving companies. And personally, I got a lot of interviews, like many from self-driving company. And in terms of future, I think so. Compared to quantum computing, then self-driving is more tangible. It's closer to the future. It's closer to production. And actually, most of the startups in self-driving, they are facing some financial issues right now. They are getting the pressure all around from the investors. So most of the startups, they will probably eventually be acquired by those big companies, especially big vehicle companies. For example, for Woven Planet, the company that I am in, so the Woven Planet is actually previous Lyft self-driving department, and then got acquired by Toyota. So now we are like a subsidiary of Toyota, and we build some assistant driving instead of fully self-driving system. So that if we have this L2 level assistant driving, we can sell it together with Toyota's vehicle. And then it can generate revenues. So it can start make money, and then business model can sustain. So I would say like self-driving, probably like the fully self-driving vehicle will not be there like in 10 years, but we are building it in like incrementally, and we can generate revenue during this process, and that's enough for you to consider your career, I think. And I have to like compare it to quantum computing. So right now, quantum computing industry, it's really hard to generate revenue. in contrast. So that means it cannot hire so many like engineers or scientists in the industry. And it's going to take longer for quantum computing industry to reach there. But yeah, I guess like John is mainly working on the machine learning theory, like research part, so he can answer more about the machine learning part.
I might be not the right person to ask this question, to be honest, because I'm a little bit of a pessimist and a Luddite, to be honest. But as far as ChatGPT and like understanding human language and maybe artificial general intelligence or whatever the term is, I don't know. I think he used the term understand, like these large language models understand human language. I don't know if we can say that per se. That might be a question more for someone working in philosophy of mind or cognitive science. Because if you think about like Markov chains, there are Markov chain models of language, and those just work on probabilities of what's going to be the next word in some string. And if you're a pessimist, you could think, oh, these large language models are also just kind of some maybe neural network. I don't know what the architecture of these large language models are. But on one level, it's just math. It's just making some kind of prediction. So I don't know, is my answer to that. I have no idea. But as far as creating jobs, I think there's a very good chance when you have any kind of technological breakthrough or change in the means of production. Let's say there are going to be knock-on effects in the structure of society. If you think about going from writing assembly to writing something like C or even higher level like Python, the creation of these new programming language paradigms didn't destroy an industry. They just created a different set of skills that people needed to pick up to get new jobs. So maybe working well with large language models will be a new skill. That's a very marketable thing. I could see BuzzFeed wanting ChatGPT, competence in their, clickbait writers. That's one job I could see it creating. So I don't know. That's kind of my ramble on your question.
Okay, thank you. So I still got a job for I still got a question for John. So
Okay.
Now you are doing some theoretical research on these machine learning models. So you're trying to explain why this model works. So do you think that's more like a research job, and how does it compare to like a postdoc position? So which one would you like better?
I enjoy what I'm doing now. It's a lot more applied. So I'm not, like day-to-day doing algebraic topology or anything. I'm taking algorithms that have been published in other papers and implementing them in our systems to try to understand why these systems are making the decisions that they make. There's kind of a very computationally expensive brute force way to make these, to generate these kind of explanations, but it just gets prohibitively expensive very quickly. So we work with a bunch of approximations to try to generate these explanations. So that's the kind of stuff that we work with. Is someone comes up with a new approximation of this kind of gold standard algorithm, and then we see if it's something we can do at scale very quickly. We have to be able to implement these algorithms in a way such that they run in less than half a second or something. Because if it's a very good quality explanation we generate, but it takes forever to generate, that's not something we can really use. It has to be quick enough to be responsive to users, in an app, which is that's a very new thing that I had to get used to, is this kind of sense of urgency that you don't always have in physics research. You can let your job run for 5 days on the farm if that's what gives you the accuracy or the precision that you need.
Okay, thank you. I think Matt maybe has a question.
I do have a question, and everyone else, like, I think it's the thing, like, for the people like attending with the questions, like, try to use the hand raising thing, so that way we can figure out like who actually wants to say something. So I have one question that applies to all the panelists, I think, which is that I am hoping, fingers crossed, to graduate a year from now in next May. And so like I am beginning kind of like the job search. And so I'm finding myself, mainly interested in the ideas of like data science and like machine learning. And so I think about like the skills I've like gained in graduate school and what I've learned doing. And then I've kind of gone and I've now like taken like a, a course or two like on a machine learning and like statistical learning and that kind of ideas. And other than like putting that on my resume and say like, hey, I've done this research, I've published these papers, I took these 2 machine learning classes, and I would like to work for your company. That has not been very effective, unfortunately, like so far. Like I've applied for probably like about 8 or 9 internships both last year and this year, and have like yet to get a call back or an interview. And then I've talked to my friends who have also like found positions, and they kind of told me like, you're doing it wrong, you need to apply not to 8 or 9, you need to apply to 80 or 90 before you start like hearing back. And that was reassuring, knowing that I maybe I was just not casting my net wide enough. But I was hoping that maybe you can like talk about like your own experiences and like how this is what it was like being on the job market. When did you start looking? How did you do it? Like, did you do networking? Did you go to conferences and like talk to people? Did you talk to national labs too and see about research opportunities there, or just comment on your kind of experiences and how that eventually kind of like unfolded?
I think I can preface by saying that the postdoc job market is very different from the industry job market.
Yep.
So maybe my experience isn't the most applicable to you, because I think there is a postdoc for everyone.
I am gonna apply to like both postdocs and like jobs. And so like at some point I'll ask you like maybe the same thing about like what should I do if I'm applying for a postdoc.
Yeah.
So I could share some of my timelines, I think. Because my job, like my title is software engineer, but actually the work I am doing is also machine learning. So let me try to remember. So I think like I spend a lot of, so it's never a bad idea to like be more proactive. So I think it's better for you to like do some kind of networking, like even just in LinkedIn, you can just send some code message to anyone and ask for a coffee chat or some video calls, and that works actually. So for me at the beginning, I was thinking to find a job in quantum industry. So in that case, I did a lot of networking. So I basically use all of my resources to connect with every company in the world, because there isn't much quantum computing companies at that time. And that's very efficient. So if you talk to someone inside the industry, they will know is there any like openings in this company, in that company, and what kind of position that fits you best, and what kind of and the salary range which you may care about. This is for quantum industry. So this is a very small industry. However, when I moved to looking for jobs in tech in general, so I just prepared like 2 months of leak code, and I submit a resume like full of projects. Those projects are not like theoretical physics projects. They are like machine learning project, quantum computing project, compiler project, and also a web application project, and also my startup. So yeah, 2 months spent like purely on leak code, and then submit. I apply like around like 200 to 300 jobs, and then got around 20 interviews. I think that's kind of the number you should expect. And that's my experience. So for machine learning part, I don't think you so there are 2 kind of positions you can apply. You can either apply for machine learning engineer, which is more they require more expertise in machine learning, and then you can also apply something like software engineer, but inside their job description, they will say they also require some like data science, statistics, machine learning skills. And in that sense, you can still like working on the machine learning, but under different title. But you will like eventually it's possible like you basically do the same thing.
Right. Okay, so I'm off by like a whole order of magnitude, or like, you know, you two, in terms of like actually like applying for things. Okay. All right. That is like that is what I've heard also, but sorry.
Yeah, I
John.
applied to 100 something. I don't remember offhand, but I applied to a lot of jobs and got maybe 10 interviews, if that.
Okay.
And leak code is a useful thing for those interviews. Like for Meta, I think I had 4 30-minute like live coding things where someone was like, here's the problem, get it done in 10 minutes. Okay, here's the next problem, get it done. So practicing those and being able to explain out loud your thought process, like why you're taking a certain approach and kind of like what optimizations you might try after you get this first maybe brute force thing. That's a good thing to practice for interviews, for better and for worse.
Sorry, let me follow up with this real quick, and then we can get on to someone else. For like, you know, in terms of like how far before graduation did you like really seriously start to like look for positions and like start applying?
I don't remember. I think so. I started applying maybe a month before I graduated, and then after I graduated, I was kind of part-time for Kushni as like a research assistant for minimum wage, but I'm not bitter. But I think it took like 6 or 7 months of applying for jobs to get
That's
one.
also what I've heard. Okay, well, it's good to know
I don't
there's
think it's typical.
consistency, at least among like people that I've talked to. Okay, good, thank you.
So let me add a little bit to that.
Please.
At least in my observation, and this could be completely off, and but you know, I just kind of speaking openly. I feel like there are two ways that, or there are two major ways that one would graduate. Your lab runs out of funding for that project that you're working on, and you find a job. And you go to your advisor and say, I have a job. We need to get out, you know, we need to get me out of here. So I would say definitely take a proactive approach to finding a job. You know, I would say don't necessarily wait until you graduate to start looking for a job, or getting pretty close to graduation to look for a job. So that's definitely one thing that I would encourage you guys to do. Whether it's a postdoc or industry. I'm sure Grace can comment on the postdoc part, but definitely industry for sure. And then as far as, you know, the number of applications goes, I think the same experience goes for me. I mean, I applied to a whole bunch of places, and yeah, reach out to people. I thoroughly echo what Ming said, that like reach out, drop a line to both hiring managers if you can find them, but also to people that work in the company in the same team, or doing things that are close to what you're applying, because you can get internal referrals, and internal referrals just immediately put you on the top of the list. At least you will get an interview if you get an internal referral. And you know, a lot of times you just have papers, and which are awesome. In, for example, the data science and machine learning, but there are open sources and like open challenges that, you know, it comes with a code, and or it comes with data, and you can kind of apply like Kaggle type of things.
Kaggle.
Exactly. So do a project, so that when you go to the first round of interviews and they say, do you have any experience from start to finish? But your paper doesn't necessarily fit that description, do a simple Kaggle project. It will go a long way. At least getting you to the next step, and then you're stuck with the 4 technical interviews that John mentioned. So at least get past the first round of getting noticed, and then it's on you. And you know, there's a little bit of luck. There's a little bit of really showing, you know, your skills. But the other thing is, you apply to 200 roles because if you know, LinkedIn has this cool thing that says how many people have applied. If you look at them, there's sometimes in the hundreds. There's sometimes it says over 200 people have applied. So don't get let down. You know, it all works out if you do this stats. But it takes patience, and don't take it personally if even if you go through 3-4 rounds of interviews. I've done that, but you don't end up with an offer, is because it's a big pool. But there's also roles for that big pool.
Yeah, referral like is very powerful. So Steve and I, we are working on the same company because I referred him like when he applied, and he immediately got an interview.
Okay, so like networking and connections sounds like it. You know, people use this word like networking a lot, and like
but it's really asking for referrals.
Okay, so that I'll have to start networking more.
Like, and this goes for academic positions as well, but in a slightly different way. Like the networking, instead of being a referral, it's really nice if the place you're applying has a letter coming from it internally. It's a letter of recommendation in that case. But those are a little bit harder because they have to know you. Well, not harder. I don't want to say they're harder. They're different because those are expected, because the letters are expected to be able to speak to your expertise and what you do and how much they know you. So like for my position at Fermilab, I had Fermilab letters. And I cultivated them through my entire PhD to make sure that I could come to these people and that they would write them for me later.
Right.
So the same things kind of go in both directions, but different outcomes.
Yes, I want to make another point. Yes, Meng sell me for $3,000. So I think I should say, for the preparing the time, I interviewed with a lot of companies. I did an interview with the quantum trading. I also did 2 interns, one with software engineer, one with data scientist. So I think LeetCode is one of the most important part if you want to find a job, for example, related to the coding. So most of the companies, I think definitely it is true for John Matter. So for LeetCode, most of the companies, they require you to give the best solutions, so best computational time complexity. So with no one pass, so with no bug, so you write all the code with no bug, you can write. And so this is the kind of like a basic requirement. So most of the company, they require at least the medium hard difficulty if you go to the LeetCode, or higher. So for example, Amazon, Facebook, and also include other company. So those questions are hard level in the LeetCode. So if you fresh to the algorithm, so don't know what is the tracers, kind of those DFF, definitely you need a lot of time spent on the LeetCode. So you definitely go over all the questions in LeetCode. Not all the questions, at least a couple hundred questions. Make sure you know how to solve those questions in one pass, bug-free, best solution within very limited time, 30 minutes. And I think if you want to find a job in industry, it is totally, yeah, for sure. So it is totally different from the work in your research. So they kind of like more, for example, the skills, at least for me, it is different. as in industry, a lot of cases we use, for example, AWS. We use, for example, machine learning. We need to use a lot of OOD. Needed to build a pipeline, all those stuff. Actually, a lot of people, at least for me in research, I don't know what is pipeline when I was in industry, when I was in academic. So a lot of people, they may need you to have those kind of like industry experience. And I think internship helped me a lot when I find a job. I got a couple of offers, include Bloomberg from current company and a lot of company from here. I think if you don't have an intern, if you don't have experience working with those stuff, so when you yes, so when you apply for the job, so especially during the HR round, so probably those HR is more likely give the chance to people have a couple of internship, did a lot of related project. So I think internship is also very important stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I wanted to ask a question, actually specifically, and I think we actually already kind of covered it a little bit, but to Grace, because Grace, you are the person that has continued on in academia, and I know that in physics, for a lot of people, at least when they start their graduate journey, they really are intending to continue on in the academic route. And then somewhere along the way, yeah, we're told to know it's like it's
the Hunger Games.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's true.
Yeah.
I'm actually covered in blood. Sorry, what was your question? I'll stop joking.
Oh no, but like actually like exactly that. Like so how difficult is it actually to continue on in the academic path? And then what advice would you give people for how to navigate that successfully? And yeah, and just talk to us about your experience with that and where you are right now in your journey.
Yeah, so I'm super new, right? So you can't ask me what success looks like because I don't have it. I'm in a temporary position, right? Now, the caveat to that is I'm in the best case scenario for a temporary position. So I have a named fellowship. So you'll learn if you want to go into the postdocs, there are different levels of postdoc, and they give you different levels of security and put you in better positions for the next stage. And everything has to be towards the next stage. Like everything you do, the people you talk to, everything has to be towards that. I want to be a professor, so it has to be like everything has to go in that direction. So you can there's like national lab postdocs. I can only speak from a high energy perspective, which is slightly different. It's very kind of structured in how you go. But for example, I'm on CMS, so the really large collider physics, high energy physics experiment. The levels of postdoc kind of go as this, like university postdocs, pretty much every university that you would want, most universities that have any sort of standing whatsoever have a postdoc. And universities will hire postdocs for different reasons. Normally, they hire a postdoc because they need someone to actually push results through. Universities that can put postdocs on hardware projects, so that means they're getting big grants, it means they have students that can help you do stuff, it means they'll be able to fund grad students so they can do work for you, to get papers out for you, and it means that they can give you hands-on hardware experience. Because when you get to the next stage, like the postdoc is meant for you to prove that you can run a research group. That's what universities look for. They want to know, do you have the vision to continue a research group, which you might not have in the beginning. Like I right now kind of have an idea of what I would do, but I don't have the details. But they want to show, do you have an idea? But then more importantly, can you execute it? So they want to show that you can mentor students, that you can deliver results. That means that they'll go up to grant review. And if for in like high energy physics, if you can build a detector. So these are the things that they look for. So you want to make sure you get those experience in the postdoc. You want to make sure that then the postdoc you apply for gives you those opportunities. So do they have enough funding to, like in my case, send you to CERN? Do they have an assembly hall so you can actually build stuff and do the hardware? Do they encourage people to live off site, you know, to go to Fermilab, to go to CERN if they don't have those opportunities for you at their place? So there's that level. And opportunities are what you make of it. Like, just because the, you know, description doesn't have that in it, that doesn't mean you can't make that in it. But then you should know what then it's a negotiation between you and the PI that hired you, kind of what you can do. But you want to make sure that you hit those criteria that shows that you can actually lead a research group when you get to the next stage. And then that's like the university level, and that's wildly dependent on what grants the university received, what you can work on and what they'll pay you to work on. At the national lab level, it depends. So there you generally get a little bit more freedom because the groups are just larger. So for example, CMS will put out a call. Fermilab has the largest US CMS research group. They will, like last year, they hired 5 postdocs. And from those postdocs, they could pick more or less what they worked on within the CMS group. Some were hired specifically for like a computing project, but most were allowed to, but then they could pick their physics analysis or their whatever they do on CMS data. So there's that kind of thing. So the lab postdocs give you a little bit more freedom that way. And then you have the like named fellowship tier. So this is what I'm lucky enough to have at Fermilab. But these are generally special applications. Those also only open, this is the key, they only open once a year. Named fellowship season is in the fall. So if you're planning to graduate next year, make sure you apply this fall for the named fellowships. They're also totally random, and they have wild things that they look for. So normally they're like university or department wide. So for example, Princeton has the Dickey Fellowship, which is for the entire physics department. And you are expected to write a research program. So in your application, you write, this is what I want to do, because it's not tied to a specific professor. This is why I want to do it. If you get interviewed for that, it could mean that you were the best applicant, or it could mean that a CMS person got it last year, so they're not going to hire one this year, so that's why you didn't get that interview. And that's how it goes with these named fellowships, because they're normally coming from a different pot of money. So in a way, you're divorced from the requirements of the experiment that would probably work on. But in a lot of ways, they want to make sure it is kind of evenly distributed across whatever body is giving it. So you have that aspect to go with it. And I just happened to hit the sweet spot where Fermilab was willing to hire a CMS person. They liked my idea. I had the right skills that Fermilab happens to look for. Like, I know that the national labs tend to like people with instrumentation and hardware experience for their experimental physics PhD, or for their experimental physics positions, which I happen to have. So all of that kind of aligned for this named fellowship. But if it had been the year before, a CMS person got it the year earlier, so I probably wouldn't have gotten it the next year. So these are things that you take into account. And yeah, every person who wants a postdoc can get one. That doesn't mean you should, is what I would say take away. Only accept positions that actually put you in a competitive place for the next year. 1-year contracts from a professor that only wants you to build something, won't let you do physics analysis, leave it. Not worth your time. Go do something else where they'll pay you more, because that's not actually a position that's going somewhere. And that's the attitude that unfortunately you need to have with it, because you don't want to waste your time. You have to be willing to do the dirty work, I guess, and play the political game that it is to get a permanent position. Sorry, that was a long-winded answer.
That was very, very helpful. Yeah, and I think
I wouldn't do anything differently either. I would like to say that I fully wanted to do this, and I'm exactly where I want to be.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, very, very, very short follow-up. What is your thoughts on like second postdocs, like people who do a second and then maybe a third postdoc and things like that?
Wildly depends on the field.
Okay.
Also depends on the country. Mm-hmm. So, for example, high energy physics, if you're in the US and you get a US-based high energy physics postdoc, you can maybe do a second one, but you don't want it to be longer than a year or so. And then if that doesn't work out, you should probably not. That's high energy physics. They normally go for 3 to 5 years. So if you are at your 5 year and you still haven't converted that into a permanent academic position, you should do some soul searching and figure out if you really want to continue or not. If you're in Europe, that's very different. They only do 2-year contracts, so you're expected to do 2. So you really need to know what does it look like for your specific field? Because I think like condensed matter ones are only 2 years generally. Then you probably do need a second. From my understanding of kind of the American system, 4 to 5 years, like 3 years is like when you're expected to start applying to permanent positions. Then you've done enough time as a postdoctoral researcher to get some skills that maybe you can run your own research group. 4 years is kind of the sweet spot. 5 is kind of your last chance, and then decide. It's not one size fits all, but that's kind of how it is. It wildly depends on your field and the positions that you've had. Is the answer.
Yeah.
Like for me, for my position, I have a 3-year contract renewable up to 5. If after 3 years, I'll start applying to permanent positions. If I don't get one in 3 or 4, the only thing I would consider taking probably would be a CERN fellowship, which is an additional 2 years. And if that didn't work, I would probably not continue in the field. I wouldn't want to do another long one.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that's a question. Yeah, a lot of people have, unfortunately. They just get stuck in like postdoc. All right.
Postdoc treadmill.
Yeah, exactly.
Postdoc apocalypse, postdoc-apocalypse is, I think, the technical term.
Yeah.
So because you will make more money other places. Like people will value your skills and you should take them to where they are valued. And if academia is not that place, it's unfortunate that it does this to people, but it's no longer the gold standard. You can be an amazing scientist and not be in a professorship.
All right, thank you. Okay, Supriya, I think you have a question.
Hi guys. So this is Supriya. I'm a 4th-year condensed matter theorist. So as a theorist, I have a question related to like the transition between doing theory and in future, if for example, if someone applies to physics-based industry, which mainly do like experiments like laser, or as Sina said, like MRI and stuff. So how likely or how difficult is it for a theorist to like get those kind of physics-related industry jobs, or if they at all consider any theorist in their field, I mean in their job positions. So do you guys have any like comment on that?
Sina, do you know like in the like physics-based industry, do they hire theoretical physicists?
That's a great question. I can only talk about, I guess, the medical imaging community, at least as of right now, and I think that they do. I've seen rare examples of it. I don't know if it's rare because they take fewer theorists, or is it rare because fewer theorists apply? That I couldn't tell you. I haven't really paid attention to that. So I guess any other panelists, maybe they can contribute, but I'm not entirely sure.
I heard Google with postdoc positions, right?
Oh yeah. So like so Google is probably not a physics-based industry. So quantum computing might be. So quantum computing, they hire theoretical physicists, but it's really hard to get in. So I also interviewed like some of the companies, the startups. So it's very competitive. So you have to have exactly the background that they are looking for. And also the job is very unstable, which means you probably will not get well, in general, like the job in startup is not very stable. So they will do like sometimes they will do several rounds of layoff, and the salary series would be the first that they lay off. That's very unfortunate, because for theoretical physics, even if we are in the company, so we are not directly dealing with the product that generates the revenue. So we are mostly likely in the R&D side, R&D department, which is a cost department. So if you take this view, so yeah, quantum computing, so you need to do some research on quantum computing, and you need to have publications in quantum computing. And it's also better that you can have a quantum internship before you apply. So that's for quantum computing part. And like in general, I think theoretical students, so most of us will choose to do like software engineer, or like machine learning engineer, or data scientist. I think that's a very common path for now. And like I think several years ago, like going to the bank industry is also very popular. So you can be some quantitative researcher in the hedge fund or in the bank. That's also a option for series. So you can try to like see if those matches your interest. And I think also like in semiconductor field, I think when I was looking for jobs, they also hire some series to do simulation in semiconductor industry. You can also like find some of their openings there and talk to them. But in that case, they require some job skills like DFT, and also material simulation, something like that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so so that's like a kind of a backup if I want to stay in physics, but mainly I'm like learning on those data science skills like machine learning and stuff. So that will be like if I switch to industry, so mainly I'll be focused on machine learning part of the industry. But yeah, if I'm interested in like physics based industry, so that's why I wanted to know, like for a theorist, how much opportunities could be there. Yeah, thank you for your answers.
I want to make another comment, sorry. So I think, especially when you're doing PhD, especially during the last couple of years before you graduate, it is kind of like the last chance at a very low cost for you to get experience on other different areas. So I feel like different area definitely have different work experience. For example, quant. For example, data science. For example, for example, software engineer. I think during the last year, I learned a lot when I was doing interns in different areas. So it will give you the real experience when you work in this company, how the work will looks like. So probably I was thinking I'm doing data science in the future, but after I do intern, I say no, it is not my area. So try a lot of different area, try a lot of different industry. Probably you will like that one a little bit better than you thought. Probably some other area, it is not what you were thinking. So doing intern, it is probably the last, one of the last chance, especially when you do your PhD. You don't have to worry about your fundings, a lot of stuff. So just do it. So 3 months in the company, you will learn a lot and get a real experience when you work with the company, how it feels like.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you guys. All right, I think Matt had a question.
Well, I was gonna ask Sina, did you have something you wanted to like comment on?
Yes.
I saw you had your hand raised.
I did actually. We changed the topic a little bit, but I had a follow-up question for Grace. So when I was kind of looking for roles, I do remember I was quite interested in not necessarily the tenure track professorship positions at universities, but kind of the the path to becoming a staff scientist at a national lab, and whether what you described as a path to becoming a tenure track professor mimics the path to becoming a staff scientist at a national lab. If you, for example, didn't want to have the responsibility of training students and such. So I was interested in that. I remember back in grad school, so maybe that might be relevant to some folks here too.
Yeah, so it depends on the position. Well, okay. The mentoring students, maybe not so much, but otherwise, most things are exactly the same. So the staff scientist positions will also still ask for letters of recommendation. You will still be acting within a team where new people get added, and national labs are always inherently, well, depends on the lab. The basic research labs are always inherently in partnership with universities. So it'd be very unlikely that you would never be expected to mentor anyone. So being a good mentor, maybe not is your full thing, but that's always something they look for, and they would always pick someone who can do that over someone who can't. The lab skills are slightly, the way you would approach it can be slightly different, but you still need the strong letters of recommendation that come from diverse groups of people. So if you want to have a staff scientist position, you still need to make sure that your letter writers are either from that institution, know people at that institution, and can speak directly to your experience and how it applies. But you have a little bit more flexibility in that you can specialize. What if you want to go into the staff scientist specific positions. So like in that, so for it as an example, like on CMS or really in any sort of like high energy physics, you are expected to have hardware experience. So can you build the detector if you're an experimentalist, and can you analyze the data that comes out? So you have these two really competing things that you have to do, where you have to build your detector, but then you also at the same time have to make sure you're publishing a bunch of papers and doing a lot of analysis. If you want to, that's necessary for like the faculty positions if you want to be a professor. For the staff scientist, if you're going to drop one of them, drop the data analysis and become a hardware expert, because you have to think of what is the purpose of a national lab. The purpose of a national lab is to support the US science endeavor. And national labs have more stable funding and they can hire staff scientists. So it's their job to be kind of the longer term thing in like the DOE's projects. So for example, if you're a silicon sensor expert, you can have a position at a lab, but then you're only going to be building silicon sensors. Or you're going to be, and they might be different. They'll be for different detectors, they'll be for different trackers, but that'll be what you do. And that'll be your position, and that's what you focus on. But then the other thing that the national labs really like, because that's a facility that can actually do that type of thing. You can also become, if you become sort of more of like a project manager, what that'll end up being is like, okay, what else can the national lab do? Well, the national lab hosts the experiment. So I was talking to one of the staff scientists here at Fermilab. What she does now basically is manage large-scale construction projects. She does neutrino physics, but she's the one that booked the cranes that lowers the liquid argon like TPC into the ground. So her view, like her job day to day as a scientist, is now very different than even what it is now as a postdoc, because that's something that she can do at a lab that other groups can't. But then because of that, she doesn't get to do physics analysis anymore. So you have to kind of sacrifice. It's not sacrifice. You pick what you enjoy and you pursue that. And then those skills would be, okay, she now has to be able to do lots of different projects. They're all, large scale construction, they're all liquid argon, but then that's what you do. And it's your job at a lab to execute those projects. So you'd want to make sure your letter writers can show that, and that they're coming from people who have that type of experience. So otherwise it's the same, but maybe you can focus a little bit more on instrumentation if those are the jobs you're focusing on.
Cool, thanks. It's helpful.
All right, awesome. Yeah, thank you guys. All right, Matt, I think you might have had a question.
Yep. So yeah, this time I'm gonna ask about like the academic job market, specifically to Grace, I guess. And I'm a theorist, so like this do your best, I guess. I'm sorry. So like in terms of like going on the job market for postdocs, from what I've talked to other people, they say, you need to go to academicjobs.com and see what's there and like, and apply. And so like that much, that makes sense to me, I guess. But like, is there like a better system to doing this? Like, and then like there's that, like how does this work? Like what do you do in terms of applying to postdocs, and like how does that function? And the second part of my question would be like, if you really want to go into postdocs and you like your heart is just 100% set on that, does it make sense to just kind of like stay in graduate school for maybe a 6th year or an additional year to maybe get that extra paper like done, or maybe take the ones you have on archive that are, getting close to being published, and then go ahead and get them published and accepted, and just to have that on your like CV and say, okay, I have 3 first author publications instead of 2 first author publications and an archive preprint. Like, is that really going to make a difference, like at the end of the day? So
the way that this is where it's very similar between industry and postdocs. A lot of it's who you know. Yeah. So the way that I would suggest you can, and this works for any of them, actually, go to conferences, talk to people, be a part of your larger research community, because that's what you're saying you want to be a part of. Like when you're going for a postdoc, you're like, I am invested in this community and I want to stay contributing science to it. These will be the people that you learn from. These will be the people who inform your papers going forward. They'll be your reviewers, this sort of thing. When you meet them, if there's someone who's doing research that you really like, ask them if they have positions in their group. Because even if they don't right now, in 5 months, they might. Next year, they might. These types of things. Or they'll be like, hey, I'm familiar with your work. I don't have a spot for you, but I know this other one. So that's something that can augment academic jobs online. There's also like Inspire HEP that has like high energy theory positions and this sort of thing.
There are positions in high energy theory. I'm kidding.
Yeah, there are. They're very competitive, but that's not all of it. Things are competitive, right? But what matters is if you're the right person for the position. So then when it comes down to the judgment call of do I graduate sooner or do I stay longer, I would say it goes back to what I had said earlier, where you want to make sure the position you accept gives you the skills you need and makes you competitive for the professorship track. If that job comes on the market now and it's exactly what you want, it's with the person you want, it's doing the stuff you want, apply for it. Worst case, they accept you and you just now need to graduate.
Yeah.
Fine. But, or I guess worst case is you don't get it, but like that's the judgment call you make, is like, if you have the perfect position open when you're about a year out, apply to it. And if you don't get it and they were like, hey, you don't have enough papers, well, then But the position that is perfect for what you want, if it exists, apply for it. Don't let some arbitrary timeline of your PhD inform when you go for that position. Because best case scenario, they hire you and then you deal with the graduating part. That's what I did. Like the Letterman Fellow opened, I knew I was going to graduate sometime the following year. I applied. I had my analysis wasn't done, but they hired me anyway. So then the question was like, okay, I have this great job. Let's finish this and be done, because grad school is just that step into the next part. So I wouldn't worry so much about the exact details of how many papers, when, this kind of thing, but it's more the position that you want. If you're reading positions and if you talk to people and it doesn't seem like that's one that's going to give you the skills to put you in the next step, if they're not going to support you in your position, in your like going through, like that's one of the other things you should do when you apply to postdocs, is talk to the people who've been their postdocs, talk to the rest of the community, and is like, does this professor write good letters? Will this one give you exposure to make sure that you can be known enough to move into the next phase? And if it doesn't meet those requirements, finish your other paper and apply to other ones, because that postdoc's not going to help you.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, don't let the PhD timeline hold you back, I think is the my tip. Apply early. Best case scenario, you make more money. Like postdocs are a pay raise.
Right, yeah. Okay, thank you, Grace.
All right, I had a very quick question to ask. This was, I guess, primarily it would be for John and Ming. I know that a lot of the grad students eventually in physics do eventually, to some capacity, transition into more like CS data science jobs. But recently, at least from like what I've been hearing of other people's experiences, there seems to be like those people seem to be having some difficulty like finding jobs. There seems to be like recently less jobs in data science, especially, that are available. I was wondering if you can talk to that. Is that something that's happening? Do you guys expect this to be something that will continue to the future? And for the people who are going down that path, what special things can they do to like become more competitive, or areas they can focus on to become more competitive?
Yeah, I get the impression that several years ago, maybe mid-2010s, there was this big kind of rush and desire for physics PhDs coming into machine learning or data science. And then that kind of dried up, maybe going into this decade. And then more recently, we've seen mass layoffs at Google and Meta. I mean, Meta laid off 12,000 people in November. There's another 10,000 coming, this month, the next. So yeah, it is more competitive. I'm new in this field, so I really don't know what to expect, unfortunately. So I don't know if I have any advice here. It's not the best answer, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's hard to tell. Like our company also just went through a round of layoff. So I'm in a small company actually. So our company only has 350 people. And like several days ago, they laid off 50 people. So now we only have 300 people left. And we are still in hiring freeze. So it's hard to expect like when it will recover. But yeah, but at least like if you are still in the school, so you can still get more preparation, do more like research, or like do research on machine learning, and also like do more projects, I would say.
I guess one thing I'll say as far as making yourself more desirable, kind of going back to something that I think Grace was saying, like if you can establish some kind of domain where you are the expert, like you're the person that knows how to do this, whether that's at a company you're currently working at or whether you're on the job market, if you can show that there's something unique about your skill set, or if there's some project that you've done that's particularly unique, I think that makes you a better candidate for a job. So you mentioned Kaggle and all these other publicly available data sets. There's going to be a lot of people that have pulled out the New York City cab data set and did, some kind of classifier on that or whatever. But if you are somehow able to find some kind of new data set and pull that together, clean it, train some kind of model on it, I think that would be a very useful project to try to get on your resume, on your website, if you have some kind of portfolio. Find some topic that you're passionate about that's outside of physics, outside of computer science. Like I really enjoy music, so I spend a lot of time goofing around with machine learning and music stuff. None of that's on my resume, but I don't know. Find something you enjoy and try to shoehorn it into a project.
All right, yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, guys. All right, I think Grace maybe had a comment.
I did, but then I lowered it because I thought maybe it was not on topic. But I thought of something that I think would be better to have told like grad student Grace, and maybe here too, is like, remember, we're so much more than our jobs. Like we're not just physicists, we're not just the job that we have. So once there are other things in your life that you can value and that you can enjoy, and reminding that those are the things that define you and not the job title and not these other things, I think will go a long way to having to navigating this process a bit easier. The reason I almost didn't say that, as I'm like, well, that doesn't, if you don't have a job, that, it's great that you love yourself, but it also is great to pay rent. So like maybe it's not quite on it, but then I guess there are many ways that you can be employed. And the reason that people hire us in postdocs or whatever is that you have just demonstrated that you have a certain set of skills, or you think about problems in a certain way that they think furthers their mission. And that might not just be in like machine learning, it might be in something else, but if you can think of what makes your perspective valuable, whether it's a postdoc or not, that's how you can move forward. Because being employed is still nice. But remember, you're not just your job.
All right. Well, thank you. Yes, very important thing to keep in mind. I think we're approaching the 9 p.m. But if there are any other questions, feel free to ask now. Maybe one last question. If not, I had a quick question to Sina, because I feel like Sina, unfortunately, for some reason, the questions have missed you tonight. But
Sure.
I know that you are doing work now, and it's pretty cool, and you're in a situation where actually I personally am in, and where a lot of physics people will eventually end up being in, which is the situation of being a physicist in a research group that's not composed mostly or entirely of physicists. And and so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and what's that like, and what you think physics people can offer on the table in like a field like the field you work in that's like more medical.
Sure, yeah. Frankly, I think that bringing in a strong analytical background to any scientific field that's open to having people like us is actually quite valuable. As physicists, we're often we have to be strong in math. Maybe not as much as math minors, but we do have to solve equations, and whether it's numerically or analytically, we have to go through that rigorous training. And so having that under your belt can actually go a long way. And I actually am in a team that we do have quite a bit of physicists that pivoted kind of into careers that kind of describing my day-to-day. I deal with a lot of physicians, a lot of radiologists, neuroradiologists, pulmonologists, and whatnot. We as scientists essentially want to make sure that want to ensure the feasibility of the projects that they're pitching to us, because sometimes Siemens and academic institutions collaborate together to do a project, and sometimes we fund them, sometimes we don't. So we are the ones that kind of want to look at the is this scientifically possible? Is this can we do this essentially? And you need a strong analytical background for that. And what you would do is you tack on other skills, for example, learning physiology and learning the clinical end of things. So again, that kind of goes back to being open to opportunities that are not exactly what you trained for in grad school. But that that might not be everyone's cup of coffee. It worked out for me, but yeah. So I probably didn't answer your question exactly, but kind of rambled on a little bit.
No, I think that's that is very helpful. Yeah, and yeah, I'd add to that too, that I think it's a valuable experience. Like if people have an opportunity to step outside that bubble and work in a group that is not made up of exclusively physicists, like it's yeah, and when you have other people from different disciplines, it's interesting to see how, you know, they approach problems, and you can complement each other's strengths and stuff like that. But yeah, thank you. And thank you to all of you guys enormously for taking the time to do this. I think I've certainly found it very helpful, and I'm sure I see people are nodding their heads that a lot of people find this helpful, and I hope that the rest of the student body as well will find this helpful. And I see in the chat that you guys you left very generously your emails and links to LinkedIn profile. So thank you for that, and we'll make sure to pass those along. And yeah, so thank you for taking the time to do this. And I guess we are a little past our time, but that's okay. So I'll end the recording now.
Kudos to you guys for putting this together. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.